Hi guys, I'm glad to be back with you for our last art lesson of Black History Month. We sure have learned a lot about some neat artists and artists who have taught us through their work about the history of African Americans in our nation. Today's artist is a little bit different though. Instead of telling stories with his art, today's artist imagines places with his art. Our artist's name is Richard Mayhew, and he is a landscape artist. So that means that he paints scenes of the outdoors. But he doesn't go to beautiful places and paint them. He imagines beautiful places and paints them. So he paints landscapes from his imagination. And not only does he paint from his imagination, but he says that when he is painting, he imagines himself inside of the painting. Not standing outside painting it, but inside experiencing it. And I think you're going to see that he has a pretty colorful imagination. Let's look at some of his work together. As we look at the landscapes together, I want you to notice the colors that Mr. Mayhew chooses. He does not paint green trees with brown trunks on green grass with blue sky. In the first painting, we saw a red tree against a green sky. In this painting, we see purple trees against a yellow sky. And in this painting, we see green trees, yes, but with an orange sky behind them and purple grass underneath. He certainly used his imagination to create some amazing landscapes. One other thing I want you to pay attention to is the way that he makes light shine through the trees. Mr. Mayhew was a master at painting sky holes. Those are the little irregular shapes that the light shines through in his trees. Weren't his paintings awesome? I love the beautiful colors. And so today we are going to paint at least one Richard Mayhew landscape. We're going to paint them small because we want to apply a lot of color to our artwork today. And I don't want us to have to fill a whole huge piece of paper. So what I want you to do is get your paper. We just need one piece. You can have a piece of scrap paper on the side if you want. And then you need your oil pastels for sure. And then you can use crayon at the end of the project if you want. But really all you need is paper and oil pastels. So go get those and come back and let's create together. Okay, here are two samples of our project today. Two different landscapes with trees. Oh, you'll notice that Mrs. Burke is working on a big painting and I have paint all over my fingernails, so that's okay. So in this one we have a purple tree with a yellow sky and an orange hill. In this one we have a red tree with a green sky and orange grass. Both of them remind us of Mr. Mayhew's imaginary landscapes. You'll also notice that these are pretty small, and that's because I'm going to teach you some things today that's going to require a lot of coloring, and I don't want our hands to get too tired, and I want us to be able to really enjoy the process. So in order to make small paintings, we're going to take, let's see, I'll put these little guys here for right now. We're going to just take our regular art paper and fold it into fourths. So that means you take one side over to the other, press it down with your hand, take the top. Sometimes this part gets a little bit wonky. Fold it to the other, press it down with your hand. Now this divides our paper into 4 sections, and you can cut those out along the lines, or you could just fold it and use it just like that right now. I'm going to go ahead and cut mine just so that I've got separate pieces of paper. But if you don't have your scissors nearby, just fold it and choose one of the rectangles to do your art project in. It doesn't have to be perfect, just cutting along that fold. And then see how I stick my scissors right inside that crease and kind of pull up as I'm cutting. And that's cutting along that fold and cutting along that fold. Okay. You can choose either way. You can either make your paper go up and down in what we call a portrait mode, so vertical, or you can create your landscape horizontally. This one was done vertically. This one was done horizontally. It doesn't matter. It's up to you. But I want you to notice our tree shapes for a minute. Mr. Mayhew's trees were never lollipop trees. They never just looked like a circle on a stick, did they? They also didn't look like a triangle on a stick. Look at the wiggly, irregular shapes of these trees. Most trees, if you look outside your window, you'll see that they have really wiggly, irregular shapes. And so we're going to create tree shapes just like Mr. Mayhew's. I want us first, whether you decide to do a horizontal or a vertical, first thing I want us to do is we're going to create a purple tree. And there's a reason that I want us to create a purple tree today. I want you to look at your pastels and point to your purple pastel. You might be looking and looking and looking. There isn't a purple pastel. We're going to make purple today as we create our tree. To make purple, we're going to mix blue and red. But we're also going to add pink, because it's light red, and light blue. Oopsies. We're gonna mix, and that's one of the most fun parts of this project today, is not only are we going to create this fun, interesting landscape using our imaginations, but we're gonna play around with how to blend and mix pastels together. Watch what happens when I take a little bit of red, and I'm doing this not on my project paper, this is just my piece of scratch paper, and then a little bit of blue. I know it's hard when my hand is in the way, isn't it? But a little bit of blue right on top of it, and it makes purple. And I can change that purpley color by adding a little bit of pink. See how it made it a little bit lighter? Maybe I'm going to add a little bit of light blue. And I can keep adding and adding and adding. See how I kind of swirl it around? A little bit more blue, maybe a little bit more red. And I'm getting a really pretty purple color. So we are going to create a purple tree. We're first going to draw it. We're not going to use even pencils today, because when we use pencils with oil pastels, it always shows through, and I don't want to see our pencil lines today. We are going to first draw the outline of our tree with the blue oil pastel. Now, they're all going to look different, but I want you to notice the size of my tree. My tree almost goes all the way to the top. It almost goes to the sides. There's about a finger space between my tree and the sides, and about 2 or 3 fingers from the leafy part of the tree to the bottom. I don't want a teeny, 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 tiny lollipop tree in the middle of your paper. I want you to do a big, squiggly, wiggly tree that fills most of your paper. So let's do what I call an invisible drawing first. That is, set your pastel down, take your finger, and just wiggle it around your paper. And what this does is it lets your brain imagine where your tree might be. Remember how Mr. Mayhew said he liked to imagine his landscapes? Well, that's exactly what we're doing. We're imagining what a wiggly tree might look like. Now, very lightly with our blue, let's just draw. And this tree is going to be a very different wiggly shape than my last tree. I'm just drawing wiggles and squiggles. Can even have big chunks out of it. It doesn't matter. But I drew a great big wiggly squiggly tree like that. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to draw my sky holes. Remember those beautiful little organic shapes where the light shines through the leaves? If you have a window in your house, you could even pause the video right now and run outside and look at some trees, and you'll notice places where the sky shines through. So we are going to just draw 3 wiggly squiggly blobs. Doesn't matter where. Just put 3 sky holes. You can even do more if you want. Maybe I'll add a little one right there. Little sky holes in our tree. Let's go ahead and draw a trunk and then draw what we call the horizon line. That's where the sky meets the ground. And you can choose any colors you want. This one is going to be, the tree is going to be purple, but you can make your sky and your ground any color you want. But can I challenge you to do something like Mr. Mayhew? Imagine yourself in an imaginary landscape, and maybe your sky isn't blue. Pick a color that's not blue. And maybe your ground isn't green grass or isn't brown dirt. Make it imaginary and fun. I think, so we're going to draw a trunk on our tree, which is just some sort of kind of rectangle-y thing that won't come all the way to the bottom of our paper, but almost. And then we're going to draw a line behind that for the horizon. So my trunk of this tree, I think I'm going to make red. You can pick any color you want that's not brown. And then for my horizon, I think I'm going to use maybe pink. Maybe my sky in this one will be pink, or maybe my ground will be pink. And see how I just did that little squiggle and I stopped at the tree trunk, went over the speed bump, and came back and continued my squiggle there. Now for the fun part. Let's make a purple tree. I'm gonna start by just coloring my tree blue. And notice how I am coloring with my oil pastel. You can color up and down like this if you want, but sometimes it's fun to swirl it around, and I'm not gonna care if I stay in the lines. Those lines were just to kind of give me an idea where the edge was. And in fact, sometimes if we go outside the lines a little bit, it gives us something that looks more like leaves. So I'm gonna squiggle and swirl. I'm going to try to cover almost all of the white part of my tree. Now notice, see how that I got some extra color in there? That's because I used this on here, and so it had a little bit of red on it. And that's totally fine, because we're gonna blend so many colors together. So I'm just gonna squiggle and swirl, imagining myself in a landscape where there might be a fun giant tree. Maybe you're imagining yourself there too. Is it warm there or is it cold there? Are you by yourself? Are you with friends? Now, I've imagined and colored so much that my pastel is getting down pretty low and getting kind of hard to use. I can take my fingernail and peel off a little bit of the pastel paper. Now, this does make your pastels a little bit weaker and more prone to break, and that doesn't matter at all because I use all of these little broken pieces all of the time too. So I'm just gonna keep on going, and I want you to keep on coloring too. But as you color, I want you to keep imagining. Think about what you might like to do around a tree like this. Do you want to climb it? Do you want to grab a book and sit under its shade and read? Do you want to stand under it and see if there are any squirrels hiding inside? I wonder if it has fruit on it. Would you want to pick the fruit? So I'm going to be quiet for just a second and finish coloring this and use my imagination too. Notice as I colored that I left my sky holes empty. And if you colored yours in, no big deal. But we want to keep those sky holes empty. Notice too that I filled all of the tree with that blue. Now for the magic. I'm going to take my red pastel next, and I'm just going to start lightly coloring right over the top. In just a minute, I'm going to keep coloring, and I'm going to turn on some music. I'm going to play jazz this time because Mr. Mayhew loved jazz music. And in fact, when he talks about his paintings, he points out how he thinks they make music. He would point to the shapes and sing along with the shapes that they made. So I'm going to play a little bit of jazz music, and I'm going to continue to color. I'm going to cover all of the blue with red, and then I might experiment by adding a little bit of pink, maybe a little bit of this blue. Maybe I'll come back and I'll put some more blue on top. Watch what happens real quick when I do that down here. Now notice those colors are really blending together, especially when I put that pink on top. And maybe I want to put some blue on top of that. And see how so much of the white is disappearing? You can just keep rotating back and forth between all these colors until just your tree is a purple that you like. I'll turn on some music and let's color together. Now that I have my tree mostly purple, let's talk about the sky. In this picture, I chose to use yellow, and there's a reason for that. I want to show you guys the color wheel. The color wheel shows us all of the colors that we use in art. And there are colors called complementary colors, which means they live across the street from one another on the color wheel. So purple lives across the street from yellow, red lives across the street from green, blue lives across the street from orange. And when complementary colors are next to each other, they make each other look really bright and even more like the actual color. So when I put yellow behind this purple, it makes the yellow look yellowier and the purple look purplier. And Mr. Mayhew used complementary colors a lot in his paintings. If we look at this one, you can see with the red being across the street from the green, that the red looks really bright red and the green looks really bright green because they kind of bounce off of each other. So I think I'm going to still do my sky yellow in this one because I really like how bright and happy that looks. I'm going to color my sky yellow, and then I think I'm going to color my grass maybe pink and orange on top of each other. I'm going to play around a little bit. Might do my trunk red and maybe add some other colors. So I'm going to play around. You can choose whatever color you want for your sky and for your ground and for your trunk. Just don't forget that whatever color you color your sky, you're going to want to color your sky holes as well. So let's listen to some more music and color together. Now you might notice that there's a difference between the piece that we just did and this piece right here. Notice how this has a lot of the white still showing through and this one is a lot darker. I'm going to show you a trick. You can put crayon on top of oil pastels and blend them together even more. I started doing it on the bottom here and you can see how that's even more purpley than this is. And you can't really see the crayon, but what the crayon does is it takes the oil pastel that's already on the paper and smushes it all together and gets rid of some of that white and adds just a little bit of color too. So watch what happens when I take a little bit of this purple right on top of the oil pastel. It blends it together. I might try a little bit of red on top of that blue and red underneath. I might try a little bit of this, what do they call this color? Red violet. You can play around with all sorts of colors. Something else that's kind of neat is to take your white oil pastel. I obviously use mine a lot and it gets a little bit broken. But you can make some areas lighter than others by blending with your white oil pastel. You could try, let's see, do I have a white crayon anymore? I tend to lose my crayons. You could try white crayon for blending. You could try a pink crayon for blending. So many options. So play around with your tree. See if you can get most of those white spots to disappear and really make it vibrant. Now you can use this technique of crayon on top of oil pastel for your whole painting if you wanted to. Let's say, I don't really like my trees back there that color. I want them a little different. I'm going to add a little blue crayon right on top, and maybe I'll get a little bit of turquoise. So you can layer and layer. I'm going to put a little, you can even put oil pastel back on top of your crayon. That's why, you see why we used small paper today, because I knew we were going to be using so much color. I wanted us to have a lot of fun. You can color right over the top of your oil pastels. On your grasses here, you can use any color you want. Isn't that fun? Now, here's another fun thing. You have 3 more rectangles. And you can imagine 3 more landscapes if you want. Following the same steps. Giant blob of a tree. Add some sky holes. Put in some sort of horizon line. Add a trunk. And then have so much fun imagining yourself in a unique and colorful landscape. I hope you had as much fun as I did painting brightly colored landscapes. I think I could sit here and do this all day. In fact, that's kind of what I do. If you can see behind me, I'm a landscape artist too. Some of you know that and some of you don't. And I paint brightly colored landscapes with a different kind of pastel. So I really enjoyed learning about Mr. Mayhew's work. I didn't even know about him until this week. So I'm so glad we got to explore his work together. And I hope you continue to create. Keep on drawing, keep on coloring, keep on painting, keep on creating, because you're all amazing artists. And I love it when we get to draw together, even when we're apart.